Lovely. Welcome, everybody. Ooh, hello. Happy Monday. We are here this evening before our 7 p.m. Town Council official kickoff to have a workshop around the Town Center District business hours. So a little bit of context for folks who've not joined us this evening. On August 9th, the council reviewed a request for an expansion of operating hours in the Town Center District, also known as the TCD, to expand operating hours by 1 hour on Friday and Saturday evenings with a closing time of 10 o'clock. The current zoning for the TCD reads kind of non-residential uses for businesses are restricted to the hours of 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So we have a number of kind of different options and ideas to throw around, which is why we are here tonight to kind of unpack a lot of the feedback that we received, as well as that initial request after we've all had a chance to kind of digest the zoning, digest the public comment, and I will throw it up to the council if anyone wants to chime in. Or not. Hopefully, yes. That's why we're here.
So, this is spot zoning. This is a request kind of put forward by Mr. Eads, supported by the owners of the restaurant, the facility. One thing that I think that is most important for us to keep in our minds that this is not because these people are nice people or because that there is public sentiment that says that, oh, this would be good for the community, because those are all good and things that that's good feedback, but it's not why we're here. We cannot consider whether they are good for the neighborhood, whether they are good people, or anything like that. That's not what we do. We're here because there is a request for a spot zoning. And this is a very untimely time for us to be considered in this. We're probably next month going to establish a committee for the comprehensive plan, and there's ample time for proper review of the district. And frankly, having been through this, know the history, how this all pieced together over the years, how the district was mapped out. It is, we can go through the machinations of reviewing what we could do, what we can't do, what we might look like, how it might benefit people, how it might benefit people who want to go to a restaurant. But the proper place for this is not at the council level. This is a place for the comprehensive planning committee to have a full input from the community and decide what it is that this community wants. And that it's, if I had a property in this existing zone, which is very limited, I'd be waving my hand because why not? An extra hour? Sure. I may not never use it, but I'm certainly going to wave my hand and say, this looks good. Food Stop, Dara's, the gas station that C. & Brown is getting ready to put up for sale. I think the implications of that piece of property surely would put us to push the pause button to say, whoa, what's going to happen there? And a lot of things go through my mind of what is allowed in the community, we lost a perfectly good service that was there for 60 years or better. Paul Brown, before that, Ronnie Moon ended up with it, and then he sold it to C. & Brown, and so now they've kind of washed their hands of it, and they want to sell the property. So the proper place for this, and I hate to belabor this, and I'd much rather have said this after everyone else had thrown their 2 cents into it, but it is a place for the comprehensive plan committee to go through the whole community, take input, and say where the town wants to go. And for us to act now, I think it's very untimely. It has a dangerous precedence to it. When we get one business in a zone, and we're looking for spot zoning, licensing, I think, is a very messy thing to get into. It's, if we're going to do something, let's create a proper zone, let's create proper parameters, and more importantly, let's make sure that the abutters, whether they're businesses abutting a business, a homeowner abutting a business, people know what the rules are and say, okay, I can buy my property, I know what the rules are. Anybody that buys a piece of land or buys a house beside a vacant piece of land is always going to wonder what's going to happen there, what could happen, and so hopefully they're wise enough to go into the town office and say, what's allowed in this district, what could happen, and so I think we need to, we have to be very careful before we change things, because the impact to people who have bought in with the expectation that this is what it is, this is what the zoning is. I'm fine with. I'll give you an example. Right down across the street from me was a gas station. Ronnie Moon owned that. Harry Holster owned it before him. Ronnie sold it to C.N. Brown. Ricky Dennison came in, ran the business for a while, and he said, geez, I'd like to have a convenience store there. And so he petitioned C.N. Brown. They changed it. They built a convenience store there, and it bombed. And what happened was that the Main Street Auto acquired the place. So we had a non-conforming business in a residential zone. And the idea of a non-conforming business is that at some point it will revert to its original intent. In practice, the practical mean made is that it rarely happens, because people make investments in this property and they don't want to tear it down, build a house, or convert it to a house. But the reality is that's what the zoning says. It's a non-conforming use in a residential zone. So anyways, they're looking to expand their operation. They're looking to take it off of Main Street and put it down on Lower Main Street. And so, part of me says, I might be able to live with this, because it's not a convenience store. It's kind of a benign use. You follow me? This is not a benign use. This is people come and go during the day. Trucks come and go during the day. We have a 9 o'clock curfew wrap up. So we know what that is. We know what that impact is. We start to change that, and we say, gee, these are nice people. We got people that support this. They're really nice people, and they benefit by this. That's not why we're here. The reason we're here is to look at why we should change a zone for one individual and create zoning outside of the normal review. And sometimes it's the council has acted in the past with a contract zone. We've seen that over the years, how a contract zone plays out, and that's, the public has input on that. But this is asking for a change, for a zoning change. So at the end of the day, I would urge my fellow council members to hold this to where it belongs, and that is at the comprehensive plan level. I've said it enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vail. Councilor Douglas.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your sentiments. Forgive me, it's been a long day, so my brain's a little foggy, but can I ask a couple of questions, Matt? Do they serve concessions at the school after 9 p.m.?
I believe so, yeah. For
So what
football
is the
games,
difference
soccer
between
games.
doing that and then having people leave after 10 p.m.?
One would be like a town use
Yep.
versus commercial
So
use.
is it all in the same zone or no? Is the school falling within town center
I
district?
think the schools probably a split zone.
Split zone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oftentimes towns, their uses would be exempt.
And what time do football games normally get out? Does anybody know?
9:15, 9:30.
9:15, 9:30, okay. And in the original take, do you know in the original, or anyone that was at that original meeting that we had, if there was any feedback regarding the traffic leaving from football games? What was do you know what the feedback was?
I mean, I don't know if it was just football or if it was just sporting events generally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
Sorry to categorize.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think that yes, we heard from folks about, the lights and there's noise, right?
Yeah.
When things disperse, there's also noise when we win a state championship and the fire trucks go down Main Street. I know I've heard that for the escort, right? So I think the feedback was that, yes, there is, noise from the school that's generated. And I can look back on my very extensive notes. But I think part of the overarching sentiment was, we kind of knew when we moved here that we were going to be abutting a campus, right?
Yeah.
The other part just related to the games that we did hear from folks at that initial community meeting in May is that some families did love this idea of Rise staying open later because their kids would have to travel kind of further afield to get a snack or get food after those games because of the 9 p.m. Kind of closure time. So a lot of families would see kids going to Falmouth or Portland or maybe to Pat's in Yarmouth, if that answers your question.
Okay. Bob, I totally, this has been something that's been keeping me up at night because it's one of those things that I haven't gotten to like a really centered thought on yet, which is tough for me because usually I can know pretty quickly how I feel about something. And I think I go back and forth because I think one of the blessings of living in a smaller town is, in a smaller community, is the lack of, not levels between which things happen, but we can make things move a little quicker. And I think I struggle with the comp plan concept because while I understand that's the route to take, and like my initial thought would be like, let's wait for the comp plan. I also recognize that the world doesn't move at a pace like that anymore. Like the current election is a really exemplary example of that, right? Like there was a candidate that dropped out and someone else jumped in and the world pivots and it changes really fast. And that's just kind of the world we live in now. Not to say that's how all decisions should be made, but it makes me question punting it to the comp plan and whether that is the right decision, especially I think where I struggle living in West Cumberland and knowing that's a different zone, different, but we're putting in a 24-hour gas station. And I'm not saying that like a resident here wasn't expecting a 24-hour gas station when they moved in or a 24-hour pizza place, but neither was the resident in West Cumberland probably, right? So I think, not saying that makes it right or wrong, I'm just talking through this out loud, but I think I struggle a little bit when someone's asking for something that feels, it's definitely not a small ask, right? When you're in a butter and hearing some of the residents last week, I think the struggle is, right, that's their every day. I don't live that every day, but I also struggle waiting 2 years can mean a lot to a business. And so it's like this tie between how do we pivot and make decisions that are good for business owners in a community, for people that live here, how do we do what's best for the residents? And part of me feels like that license approach, while it may feel mundane, is maybe a good approach, because then you think, hearing from Dara last week, that's also something that is of interest to them. I don't think the dentist is going to stay open past 9 o'clock, but I guess in my mind it would be something worth exploring and pushing further towards that, because I think if we always tie everything back to the comp plan, it's just going to makes things move really slow. That's what I'm struggling with. And 2 years for a business is a long time. I don't know. That's where I'm at.
I'll respond to that, but I'll leave.
Other folks?
Let everybody go.
Sorry, that was long-winded and messy, so
It's okay.
anyone else have
Andrew?
thoughts on that?
So would there be a way to sort of, I don't want to necessarily say split the baby, but, we got some feedback from the town attorney on different possible avenues, and one of them would be to basically do a trial run of having expanded time periods for operations, and so it would require us to temporarily, and I don't know if there's anything on limits on what temporary means, if that's in the months or weeks, or if there are any restrictions on that, or if that's just something that we would decide on our own. But it would give us a time to sort of gather the information of what would this actually look like, and then that would help inform the comp plan, because the comp plan committee will go in and they'll have some knowledge, but they won't actually have knowledge of the actual impacts of this day in, day out. In some ways, it's kind of the perfect time if we were going to go that route, because school is just starting back up, sports are just starting back up. So over the next, few months, we're going to start seeing the impacts. Is there a noticeable impact, a detrimental or positive impact for the extra hour on 2 or 3 nights a week of operations, and then we can have that for a certain amount of time, then roll that back to be able to say, like, yep, this worked, it's overall, the positives outweigh the negatives, or no, this didn't work, the negatives outweigh the positives, and then that would allow us to give that information to the comp plan committee, so then they could look at that, and then also, I'm assuming, do a more holistic approach for looking at the town itself. And are there other places, to Bailey's point, putting in a 24-hour gas station, there's one place where we have the restricted hours in town, and it's a very small, geographic area for the size of the town, and we're looking at developing Route 100. Do we need to get ahead of that with this, and we can sort of get an idea on how all this works there? I don't know if that would address sort of both of your views of it's not diving in completely, but it's also not sort of sitting back and, letting stuff take a longer course.
Mr. Vail?
So I want to respond to a premise. Are we in the business of supporting business? What's that look like? I think that is a good thing to say. We support business. I'm willing to bet that I was the only one that called C.N. Brown and said, wait a second, I want to talk to somebody about closing this gas station. This is a community asset. Dead silence. Nobody called me back. I said who I was. I said, I'm a town council of the town of Cumberland. I'd like to speak with somebody. Oh, that's so-and-so. We'll make sure he gets back to you. Dead silence. Food Stop used to be open 7 days a week. When Wayne ran the gas station, it used to be open 7 days a week. It filled a niche for the community. I used to be able to go up Sunday mornings, get my paper, get my coffee, the things those little things that make a town a community. So, on one hand, we want to say we support an idea, but on the other hand, we haven't done anything to support some of the other businesses in town. So we've let one business fold up, and we really don't know what's coming. We've let the other business close down from a 7-day operation to a 5-day operation. Is there a loss of service to the community? I would say yes. I have to go to North Yarmouth to get gas now, or I have to go out to Route 100 down to J Brothers Sunday mornings to get my coffee and my newspaper. Do I meet new people? Absolutely. Am I supporting other business? Absolutely. But I think we need to question ourselves, what are we doing? What are we doing? And that's why I think that the comp plan, at the end of the day, serves us in the best manner possible, because I think I like the food they serve at Rise. You know, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't frequent it very often, but once in a while we go up there and get fish and chips or buy a pizza. But I think that at the bigger picture, you know, we didn't do anything with the gas station. We let that fold up. None of us said, this is an important asset. Let's get on our feet and make somebody come down here and give us their attention. So, point, counterpoint.
Thank you. I would count.
Oh, go for it.
I would counter you, Bob, and say, did they reach out a hand? Did the gas station reach out a hand?
They made a business decision all by themselves.
So they're reaching out a hand, is
They
my
were not
point.
reaching out a hand.
They are, though.
Maybe so.
Point received.
We're not.
Would anyone else like to chime in? Or is everyone processing? Mike?
All right.
Mr. Eads?
Bob, putting this to the comp plan is the epitome of the kicking the can down the road. Absolutely the epitome of kicking the can down the road. You know, I thought like Bailey has since we met the last time. We overthought this, and I listened to the concerns on the council. How is this going to affect other businesses if we go 1 hour? It's not. We've got a doctor's office, a bank, a defunct gas station. We've got a variety store that doesn't want to stay open 7 days a week. It's not going to affect everybody else, so take that off the table. If there was no other argument or a point that was made last week, is when the owner of Docks came in, the old Docks, whatever it is now,
Dara?
yeah, and said, 1 hour would allow me to rotate my tables twice. That's good business. That is the epitome of good business right there, and something we should be supporting. No, you know, you talked about the council, well, supporting this because the owners of Rise are nice people. We've heard a lot of people from the community say that. Nobody here has said, we want to support this because they're good people. Ronnie, when he was here on the council, supported this. I supported this. I support this because it's good business. It's good for our town. And the town is the community. Bob, if we keep kicking this can down the road on this one particular item, you're going to see this possibly go to referendum. And if it goes to referendum by the citizens, we're going to end up with a finished product that we don't like. Because let's face it, if you and I were going to do a referendum on this, we'd include a lot more hours. And we're talking 1 hour on a Friday, 1 hour on a Saturday. If we don't do this, there's probably going to be a citizens' initiative with a lot more hours. And that discussion's already being had. It's not being had by the owners of Rise. It's being had by people in the center who want a place to go. And once that train leaves the station, we're not going to stop it, and we're not going to regulate what hours are going to be there. So we either handle this now, or the citizens are going to handle this to us. Excuse me. And we're not going to like the finished product. You're not going to like it. And we're not going to have any choice. We've had this stuff come up in council before where we've said, we've got to do it, we've got to make the tough decisions, or it's going to go to referendum. We've had that with the former manager said, you guys got to deal with it. And we dealt with it, and we got a finished product that we all can live with. You know, I hate, one thing I hate is when we overthink something very simple, and we think this 1 hour. If we were gonna go for a daily change on this, then I would agree to you. This is, you're talking on a Friday, Saturday night, 1 hour. And it is a community, both restaurants are a community value, something that I would love, instead of going to Yarmouth, to come up here to Main Street, and go there with my wife, and God forbid, stay till 10 o'clock, instead of traveling to Yarmouth. And I think the point that was brought up, like Tig brought it up, if the school, the games are getting out at 9:30, and all those cars are leaving, and all that noise, and are we really having that much of an effect on one little spot in town? I don't think we are. And you heard from other neighbors, other than the ones we've heard about from the past. You've heard a guy lived across the street said there is no issue. I have no problem with it staying over till 10 o'clock. You heard from other people that live very close, all in favor. This is a good idea. It's a good value to the community. It's not doing it because people are nice people. It's because it's good business. And like I said, what she said the other day made more sense than anything I've heard in support of this. It's good business, and that's what we're here for. And we're not here to kick the can down the road. So that's where I am.
Do you have something else to say?
Yes?
Before either, any other counselors, before we go back to Mr. Vail?
Not yet.
Okay, over to you, Mr. Vail.
We had a proposal a couple of months ago. And we voted unanimously after it came out of ordinance committee. The council voted unanimously to pass it off to the planning board. And at that point, the firestorm came, and we realized, at least I realized, that we didn't hear the whole story. We heard one side of the story. And so the owners of the restaurant were kind of served notice that they had to make some changes. And so I don't think there's enough time that's gone by, you know, to me to be just say, let's add 2 hours. So I don't feel threatened by a referendum. It's if the people, you know, the people didn't want a development, housing development here on Drown Road, and they told us loud and clear. I don't fear a referendum, but I do, knowing the history of the comprehensive plan, the short comprehensive plan that followed that, how the legislation came about, the size of the scope of the existing business district, and how small it is, I believe that the proper place for this, the proper review, is at the comp plan. And yes, that you can accuse me of two things. You're kicking it down the road, and to Bailey's comment, it takes too long. You
Well,
can't,
Bob, let's do a referendum. Why don't we do it? Why don't we do it, Bob? Why don't we, as a council, set up a referendum to vote in November to allow one additional hour on Friday and one on Saturday? Why don't you do that?
I'm happy for someone to make that motion.
Well, I'm asking for your opinion, Bob.
I won't support it,
Why?
because I believe the comp plan is the proper place for it, because I think there are other issues here with just adding an hour. It's what does Main Street look like? When I bought my house on Main Street 40 some odd years ago, Bob Benson was town manager and polled the entire length of Main Street. And at the time, I could tell you everybody who lived in that Main Street from Greeley Road down to the train tracks, and probably the whole length of it. We've had a lot of changeover.
So could I.
Yeah, so I can't do that anymore. But 100% people at the time did not want to convert Main Street to any business. They were quite comfortable. And that's knowing the history that there was a lot of business over the years on Main Street. You know, we had Hardy's Grocery Store, we had a florist, we had, Pettingill's had a store, red and white. So, you know, we've had carrot shops, and that goes back before you and I. But fact is that there's been a lot of change over the course of Main Street. But if we don't take a deep breath and say, what does the community want on Main Street? Because I'm not sure there's the support for that. There's the support for an hour. We know that. We've seen people write letters, and we've seen that, yeah, this is a great place. You know, we don't have to drive to Falmouth. We can drive to Cumberland. We're coming out of a game. You and I used to go to Cole Farms. You know, either down at Deer and Ice Cream in Falmouth. They're really the two choices as kids growing up. But if we don't take the pulse of the community, I think we're acting out of
Bob,
order.
the November election you're going to have, it's going to be a high turnout. If you said we're going to 90% of the voters, and why not give 90% of the voters a chance to weigh in on this by us setting a referendum for 1 hour? Look, Stevie Wonder could see where this is going to come out.
Let's,
You know, it is, right, what is wrong with bringing it back to the people? 1 hour.
I'm only one voice here.
so I'll chime in. I think the way that I'm approaching this is what I would want, right? And I would love to sit at Rise and go at 7:30 and stay there until 10 and have a cocktail. I would love to do that because I've got young kids and I live down the street, and that would be lovely for me. I don't feel, though, like what I want is responsible decision-making for me. And that's because we're kind of putting our personal whims aside. We need to think about what's right for the zone and the larger town. And so for me, I agree with Bob. I think that the comprehensive plan is the place to have that dialogue, because it shouldn't just be about Rise. It should be about that larger zone and, frankly, all of the zones within the town. I mean, it's been 10 years since we've done our comp plan. The population has changed. Probably the needs and wants have changed. The demographics we know have changed. And so if we're talking about looking at things holistically, I think that's the place to do it, where we're making strategic decisions, we're getting public input, and we're looking at everything as a whole rather than kind of at one-off requests. And I think that, Bailey, and I hear you, because also the ability to help businesses is something that's really, should be very important to us as a council. I always go back to Mark Segrist and the blue sign of certified business friendly. I hear that, but also we have a responsibility to the neighbors and for them, and we've heard their voices as well. And so I think that sometimes, yes, government takes a long time, but that's because it's really complex, and there are a lot of things that we're balancing and a lot of puzzle pieces that we're balancing. So while, yes, I would love to grant this request, I kind of go back to, again, it's not about me, it's not about what I want. I think that going through the process exercise for this zone as well as for the larger town is the place where I think it would be most appropriate to live. Anyone else? Councilor Douglas.
Matt, can I ask a question? Because I have not been through a comp plan here yet. So say we go through the comp plan, then what happens? If the comp plan decides that the business district hours can change, that's it, and we vote on the comp plan, and then we moving forward, those are the business hours?
Thank you for the question, Councilor Douglas. The comp plan will come back with a number of different recommendations based on looking at all the different zones and what it may recommend for different changes, but ultimately it will come back to the council and the planning board to review and take those under advisement and shape those recommendations into how they'll fit within the zone. And so then ultimately, as Councilor Eads said, it comes back to it's a council lift.
Yeah.
Ultimately at the end, and so they'll make a recommendation, but it only goes as far as where the council will put legs under it. So, but it'll come back and you'll have to shape that and say, okay, well, they recommend, let's say one recommendation would be increasing the diversity of the property tax base within town. It's a fairly general statement, right? It could mean, it could be a Home Depot on Route 1, or it could be a hardware store in the town center, you know, like True Value and Gray type of situation. So there's a lot of answers to that. So that would give the council some flexibility, and then eventually you'd look at each zone and say, well, within this zone, these are the current uses that are allowed, and, but it says we need to advance the diversity of the tax base. Okay, let's apply that here and say this use here is one that we maybe there's demand for this, and we should allow it in this zone now, where it hadn't been before. So it tries to adapt to changes that have taken place within the marketplace and land use over time since the last comp plan. But ultimately, it's going to come back to the council to say, and the ordinance committee and the planning board to make those recommendations and ultimately adopting those ordinances.
Okay, and so I guess my concern, the one thing that I get caught up in on the ordinance or on the comp plan piece of it is so much of what impacts the decision behind like this type of decision is the abutters and the residents in that area. And I don't know that those are going to be the people that are, like, it'll be some of the makeup, but you know, so much of what we're hearing from, I don't know if they'll make up the comp plan. So then it's, what is the majority, you know, someone in West Cumberland's going to say, yeah, Rise should stay open till 10. And then the consideration, then are we just circling back to the same conversation, right? And not that that's a bad thing, but I'm concerned it's like, we'll get the recommendation from the comp plan will be to extend the business hours till 10 o'clock. And then we'll have a community meeting and it'll be the feedback from the neighbors, which will be the same feedback. So then we're kind of back in the same, sorry, Bob, do you have something you want to say?
No, go ahead.
But so then we're kind of back again where we are right now in this moment, right? So, which is fine, like that's part of the process, but I also, is that the best, most effective use of our time in that way? Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying.
That's also an assumption, though, that it's going to be the same outcome.
Yeah,
right? 'Cause it
yeah.
May not be.
It may not be.
it could go
Sorry,
many
yes.
different Dialogues. Councilor Vail?
So one of the things that we can do is, or the comp plan could do, or probably, we can do away with the zone,
Okay,
and we can go back to contract zone, which,
outline what that means then.
so the bank up there,
Yeah.
the credit union, was the process of a contract zone. Any change that, I think, and maybe Mike, you might, when the Forest moved out and that became just a business, they no longer was a residence, that may have had some contract language applied to that, but a contract zone, when you no longer have a underlying district to put a business in, so somebody comes before the council and said, I'd like to do X, Y, and Z. And so you enter into a contract with that individual, you take into concerns about
Okay,
the
I see.
neighborhood, and so it's, you know, George Turner, if he was sitting here today, would say, you know, how much he disliked using contract zones and that we ought to have an underlying zone to apply to it. But sometimes a contract zone is the best way to address the neighborhood, address the needs of that individual who wants to put a business there.
Yep.
And frankly, it's a lot of concerns are addressed right there on the ground, you know.
Okay.
So it's not a bad way to go sometimes, and it's worthy of consideration.
It's more of like a case-by-case basis
Yes.
versus
Right,
like
right.
lumping everything together into one model,
We
right?
may see that come out of the comprehensive plan, is
Okay.
that we no longer support the use of a zone. We would much rather go back to a contract zone method of.
Okay. Okay.
Councilor Reese?
Matt, what would a referendum question, could it be, according to what you've heard from the town attorney, could it be specific to a food business, a restaurant business? So if either we did it or it started at the grassroots, can it just be applied to just that type of business?
Yeah, that's a great question, Counselor Reeds. I would, looking at the town center district, and then ultimately it comes down to performance standards that are in the town center district. So on this one specifically, it talks about all non-residential uses within the town center district shall be open for business only between the hours, time frame of 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. One could look at that and say, perhaps add another point into there and say, restaurants may be open, you know, and then you could specifically make that language to amend that point there and add specific language to that. And that would be what you wanted. I mean, that would probably be the cleanest way to come about with a referendum question, if one wanted to do it. Or if the council wanted to go through the ordinance committee, that could be another way to do that with, you know, through the traditional means of amending an ordinance. The one thing I would say about, I will echo Mr. Shane, that it's, you know, I think it comes down to a council lift on that ultimately, because it's a little bit more, your rate of speed is greater as a council than you would be either by the referendum process, because right now it's, what's today, the 26th of August? We'd have to come up with something, quite frankly, I don't think we'd have something ready for November, because we're coming up against the absentee ballot window, and we'd have to come up with a language and make sure it ran it by council, not the council, but council as well. And then you'd have to also take action at the council level to set it for referendum. So if it was a group of individuals looking to gather signatures, or the council at this point in time, you'd probably be looking at a June vote at this point. If you were putting it on your, if you're putting it on your radar, it's closer to the June circle
If
than
we
it is
did
November
it,
circle.
it would capture more, obviously capture the majority of the voters here in Cumberland. If we did it, because we could get it in November. If it's done by, at the grassroots, and it's done by people going out and get signatures, and it's done in June, we're probably gonna get a much smaller taste from the citizens in town, whether they want it or not.
To your point, Counselor, November is going to be a fairly busy election. There's one big ticket item that's going to be on there that will probably pull 90, you know,
Right.
high 80s to low 90s out.
So
for
we,
voter
you know,
turnout.
if they kick it down the road to the June primary, we're not, I mean, I think we'll end up in this, well, we won't, but whoever does this will end up in the same place as they would in November. But they'll end up with a product that we don't define, whatever they decide, and it's gonna be decided by a much smaller representation of the town. Okay, thanks, Matt.
Yep, you're welcome, sir.
Councilor Magoon?
So on the referendum bit, we obviously don't control if a group of citizens want to get together and go through that steps and all and get it in time and all, but I would be very hesitant for us to put that forward just because the precedent that we'd be setting of if somebody wants a zoning change, then the town council isn't going to be the one to really, you know, do the research and then, you know, say yes or no and all, that we're just going to kick it back to the community. You know, we'd be setting that precedent for this. And I think that, you know, the point of us being here is that we're the ones doing the research, making those decisions, and, you know, taking the hit one way or the other, you know, either good or bad. But it's our responsibility to be the ones to make the decision, not to say, you know, I like this, I don't like this, but let's push back to the voters, make them decide. And also, I'd be very hesitant for us to be pushing for a referendum on something like this. If it's a much bigger issue, maybe, but this seems very in the weeds to be going towards a referendum for, you know, adding 1 hour for 2 nights in one zone. I think that a lot of people would think like, well, you know, that's what they elected us to do, was to make these decisions one way or the other, instead of just kicking it back to them.
So if our decision is no, and we made that decision, and then it goes back to the people, and we don't have any control of what's being voted on, that's what's gonna happen. I mean, that's gonna happen.
Right, but with anything, that's always an option. You know, you can make that argument for any decision that we make here, that, you know, if enough of the town doesn't like it, then they'll correct us. But their other option is for them to, you know, vote us out. And that's, I'd say that's, you know, those are the two options. If we make a big enough mistake in the town, in the view of enough of the voters, they have those options. But I think it's our responsibility to be the ones to make those decisions, whichever way it goes on whatever issue it is. You know, that's what we're here for.
Just Councillor Thorson, I think, and I can circle back around to you, Mike, if you like, but.
Good discussion. I agree with Bob and Tig. In order for me to make decisions, I need data. And to me, you know, 7 people for, 7 against, a handful of emails that we got, that's not enough for me. I need more. And the comp plan provides that. It's extensive surveying, it's research, it is doing the work, and not for this zone, but for all of them. And the town is made of different zones that have different things, different specialties, if they want to do it that way. You know, the recommendations are not just for one, it is for the entire town. And we can't have one without the other. I don't like the fear language of a referendum where, you know, if we don't do something, the people are going to do it. Like, people can put anything up for referendum at any time. They can, you know, repeal any ordinance. They can suggest something. So that to me is not helpful in my decision-making process. So I don't think that we, as a council or whatever, should make decisions in fear of a hypothetical that could happen regardless. And 2 years might seem like a lot, but it really isn't. Years fly by. I feel like the comp plan, it will come faster than we know, and we're going to have a lot of data from that. We'll be able to make better decisions. And if, you know, it sounds super insensitive, but objectively, if a business can't survive 2 years without an extra couple hours, I feel like that's outside of our control as well. And supporting business is one thing, but having to, like, make concessions to keep particular businesses in business, I don't think is the right way to make decisions. So that's where I am.
Did you also have something, or?
I think Bob always has something.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Magoon and then to Councillor Vale and Councillor Eads, if you're, I'm not sure if he's still. But.
So would, you know, I like the comment about wanting data, and we have a very small sample size right now. Would temporarily doing this for a, you know, X number of months and then seeing the feedback, in theory, that would allow people that, you know, haven't given us their input, who may use it, may hate it, you know, either way, allow them time to sort of experience it and say, you know, yes, this is great, or no, this is horrible, and all. It would give us some data sooner than waiting for the comp plan, which will give us a lot more data a lot later. And it would also give the comp plan that data as well for, you know, the overarching look at this zone, but then also, you know, does this work in another place where we want to have a different zone, or change the zone to put some restrictions on, and, you know, these hours really worked, or, you know, these hours, that was just too much.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would help.
Can I respond? Sure. That is a viable option, I think. One thing is, and at the first neighborhood workshop, I know it got a little bit derailed because started talking about ordinance issues and things like that, and compliance and the experience of the abutters. And there was, you know, a push that's not about that, it's just about the hours, but I don't think it is. I think the issues that the abutters experience because of holes in the ordinance, like idling cars and pollution being pumped into their houses, you know, or buffering that isn't sufficient, or lighting that may be too bright, things like that. Extending hours without seeing where the holes are there that we need to address before extending those hours, I think that is something that we need to do beforehand. Because, like, people living next door, you know, nearby with issues, Bailey, you had said, you know, like the neighbors will say the same thing in the future. I hope they don't. I hope that we can do whatever we need to do to, like, button up the ordinance more, or make it outside of the ordinance, just making sure that the abutters aren't having, like, you know, an awful experience all the time. Because without that, I feel like adding an extra hour is just going to be adding more turmoil for the neighbors.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at as well, is I don't know if, like me personally at least, making a decision, I can separate the hours from the ordinance side of it and those issues and with their experiences. So yeah, maybe a trial would work if the other things were also addressed in tandem.
Andrew, I could support a trial period.
I think one of the other variables that sits in my head is the enforcement of those ordinances, because I think, like, just the feedback, right, that we've heard has kind of been repetitive in nature. So it's like, what are we doing to ensure, because, right, there has to be this kind of this feeling of trust, you know, amongst the neighbors, that if this decision is made, then XYZ rules are enforced to ensure that their needs are being met, right? And so I think that would make me feel different about the decision in some ways, because I think I get worried because it isn't just 1 hour, to my, you know, to your point, Mike, it's 2 hours because it's an hour and then closing duties, right? So the last person's leaving the building at 11 o'clock, and that's 2 more hours that a neighbor is going to have light pollution, noise pollution. And so I don't feel awesome about making that decision if it's not ensured that, you know, on those 2 nights, it's shutting down at this time, you know, the idling isn't happening, you know, the light pollution isn't happening, because they need to feel like there's regulations in place that are making them feel like their needs are being met based on the agreement when they bought that house and the understanding of the rules in place at that time. So that's something else that sits in my head.
Counselor Vail.
The idea of a selective enforcement or a trial period sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
But it puts us in a very dangerous position. And I can't support it. And I think we're best reading what was presented here for us. Another option identified was that the town, through the code officer, could delay any enforcement of this standard for a trial period. However, the concern would be that selective enforcement would expose the town for choosing which elements of the ordinance to enforce, while holding others for accountability in all other areas of the zoning. This could be challenged as an arbitrary enforcement. I can't think of anybody in this town who wouldn't be jumping up and down and saying, "Whoa, what? You're relaxing the rules and you're holding me to another standard." I don't mean to be
So,
grandstanding, but there's a real danger in not following the rules, you know. And I think that some of the things that the ordinance committee is going to deal with coming up is new technology, new knowledge, and how things have changed, and we're kind of trying to catch up to ordinances that are outdated, that don't reflect what's on the ground today. So I think that again, the best place for this is the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and while it's a summit, may seem like it's dragging our feet. I doubt that a referendum by any citizen initiative is going to be outrageous. I think that everybody, nobody's going to come with a referendum to say we want to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Nobody said that, Bob.
No, but
Nobody said
the
that.
idea that the referendum could be presented to us, I don't fear that because it's something that the council is going to weigh in on it, and I think that I really at the end of the day I don't fear the referendum, but the proper place for this is the comprehensive plan committee.
So, Bob, just,
Go, but Councilor Thorson had her hand up.
I put my finger up first. Okay, the one you read, Bob, I thought, well, I don't know what you were referring to, Andrew, but the first one is, it would entail the council making a request to the planning board to waive the standard temporarily, requiring public hearings at both planning board and council levels, and would need to be for specified, defined time period, and it would be applicable to all properties in the zone. So that, I don't know if that seems equally dangerous to you, to have it go through planning board, and it's temporary, and it's for everyone, including Dara, as a trial for both of those, which I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not like sold on that idea, but there is that option as well, rather than the seemingly more dangerous version of what you mentioned.
Councilor Magoo?
well, I mean, as usual, Councilor Thorson said it first and better. That was the exact same point that I was going to make, so.
So this is a workshop and there is no official action taken out of this particular meeting. I also am conscious of the time in case anyone would like to take a quick bio break before we start the rest of the meeting. Are there any kind of final comments?
Do you have anything?
Mr. Sturgis?
Madam Chair, if,
Let's hear it.
as a recommendation, maybe a good opportunity if there is consensus, at least of 4, to send this to the ordinance committee, or at least encourage the ordinance committee to take a look at this and define what a reasonable trial balloon period might look at. You say 6 months and specifically do that, and then sundown that. We could have that as an ordinance committee approach at this, and that way Councilor Thorson could get a lot of the data if you wanted to. You could have a limited time period, and you could capture what's the experience over this period of time. But there are extenuating other areas that you raised that you want to talk about, but could be fleshed out at the ordinance committee level, and then see if that might work. And if it doesn't, the ordinance committee looks at this and says, there's a lot of plates we have to get in the air to do this. Pardon the pun, but that may be the way to look at this and come back with something for the council to consider in the near term, and then say, okay, this looks like it's got merit. And then it's also, like I said, a limited time. And to Councilor Vale's point, yeah, the one about like turning a blind eye to it scares the heck out of me as a manager, and it puts Bill Longley and the town as well in an impossible situation, because it's, what are you going to decide not to enforce the standard on stairs, rise and run? Things along those lines, and it's you can't have that as selective enforcement. But if you did do it statutorily for a limited period, you could look at that and say, in 6 months we could review this and see how it worked out over the course of the winter, knowing that it does expire, at a time certain. And then you say, well, if it works out okay, a month before that expiration date came, you could say, all right, yeah, we know this has been successful. We know this hasn't been successful. And then you can let it expire. You can come up with language and say, here, we can do it. It's like a contract light, Councilor Vale.
I would say,
can I add
go ahead.
something? I was just curious because I started looking at the actual ordinance, or is that what this is? And so I started looking at some of the amendments that were made throughout it, and I also just realized the amendments that were made to the daycare and nursery to add no more than 50, I don't actually see those in those minutes. So, because I was trying to get some historical understanding of how the TCD got to the 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I started trying to understand some of the amendments that were made during the years, and trying to understand some of the rationale by making changes to this ordinance for this district But, so I just wanted to point that out to you. But, so I don't know if that needs to also be reviewed because I don't see where we actually approved increasing it to up to 50 children for our daycare center. Not to throw a wrench into the whole thing.
Sure. That was before my time.
Madam Chair, if I may, just
Please.
one last point. The other document that the council, of the 3 documents you have this evening, is the other one has, and I want to thank Planner Bridget Perry for pulling this together. It shows all the zones and if there are any hours restrictions that are in there. And so, in the memo that provided in advance of this evening, the 2 areas that we do have time restrictions on are the town center zone, town center district, which has non-residential uses, which would be, in this case, restaurants between 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Deliveries can be between 7 and 7. And then the other area that we have is the registered caregiver overlay zone, which is regarding medical marijuana, and that had the other time restrictions. And then there are others which are fairly standard, like the 10 p.m., which we have for farm-based special events, where you can't have amplified music after 10 p.m. So those are kind of our, those are the only areas where there is language. Otherwise, the planning board has held the authority to say, well, your hours should be this, between X and Y. And so that's, but if you, for future use, we thought that might be helpful to the council as well for reference and understanding the entirety. Because there was some question even last week at the planning board level as how, how the Irving is, or the Rusty Lantern's going to be able to stay open 24 hours, and it was because it was part of their, isn't that restriction over on the west side.
Just keeping an eye on the clock. We are going to get a wiggle on for our other meeting. Final comment, if this does go to ordinance and kind of, I would just be curious, and maybe this is some homework about what success is defined as, because that can be really arbitrary, right? Is that success for the neighbors? Is that success for the RISE? Is that success for the code enforcement officer, right? So if such a trial were to happen, then I think that would need to be really clearly defined, and I would be really interested to see what other municipalities have done to kind of establish those benchmarks that are fair to everybody, not just one particular party. Do folks need a short bio break before? Okay, we're going to take 5, and then we will kick off at 7:10. Sorry to be a few minutes late. All right.
No, no, this is.
We will
a
be
roll.
on air short. We are on air, folks. Folks, we are on air. Welcome, welcome.
Okay.
Happy Monday.
Swinging wood.
All righty.
I'm so excited.
Welcome, everyone. I officially call the Monday, August 26, 2024 Cumberland Town Council meeting to order. We had a 6 p.m. workshop on the Town Center District business hours, and that is why we are starting a few minutes late today. My apologies. First up is the approval of minutes from the August 12th, 2024 meeting.
I would move to adopt, and I did read them all. A long read, but Brenda did a great job. Adopt as written.
I'll give you a second.
Great, great. Any discussion on the motion?
Just really quick.
Sure.
When I clicked on the links, it did not have the revised minutes in there that we got.
Right?
Would you like my motion to respond to the revised minutes?
To the revised, because,
Yeah, because I don't see where the second adjustment to the minutes were made on page 16 and 17.
On my phone quicker.
When I click on the link for the agenda for today.
Oh, got you, but I emailed them to you, so those.
Okay,
yes.
so that's what we would be improving?
Yes,
Okay,
yep.
perfect, thank you.
Bob, did you have?
do you want to say actually, Mr. Sturgis is, do we need to say the revised minutes that,
I think you're fine, Madam Chair.
you think we're fine? Okay, great. Okay, any other discussion on the motion? I would also like to thank Brenda for incorporating all of the emails that we got in from residents as well, and thank you to all of the residents who spent time putting down their thoughts. That was not a light lift, so thank you, Brenda. Okay, I will call for a vote on the approval of the minutes from the August 12th, 2024 meeting. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, Brenda. All righty, next up is the manager's report. Mr. Sturgis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you. Happy end of August. And Labor Day is upon us, unfortunately. So I have a fairly robust manager's report this evening, but I'm trying to circle back on a number of items that had been in front of the council most recently. So at the most recent council meeting, there were a number of items that the council has requested additional follow-up on, as well as options. For the first two items, there was discussion by the council on the option of moratoriums in order to provide the town time to address two pressing issues: solar installations and PFAS and turf. The town attorney has advised that in order to adopt a moratorium, the town would need to demonstrate that there is a need to prevent serious public harm from residential, commercial, or industrial development in a specified area. The moratorium is also limited in duration to the extent that the problem continues to exist. The standard would be applicable in all instances where a moratorium is being considered. Now, in relation to solar installations, town attorney has advised that state law guarantees a right to have residential solar, subject to reasonable restrictions. So the town can regulate this, but it is less certain that there is a basis to impose a moratorium at this time, or that it would be consistent with Maine law to do so for residential solar projects. The town can certainly review current ordinances and determine whether additional regulations should be imposed, provided that they are reasonable under Maine law. The town attorney also recommends that the proper venue for this item is for it to be taken up by the ordinance committee and then to the town council and planning board with the normal ordinance revision process. There are also, regarding PFAS and turf, there are several examples elsewhere in the country of municipalities taking steps to ban artificial turf due to concerns related to PFAS, and the town can certainly consider this as well. As noted above, a moratorium in this case, or moratorium ordinances are intended to be for a short duration to protect against an imminent threat of harm. While the dangerous impacts of PFAS to human health and the environment and the presence of the chemicals in artificial turf are very real threats, it's the town's attorney's position that it does not sound as though they are imminent based on current conceptual proposal for a field. Since there is some time before this could become a reality, the attorney doesn't see that there are sufficient grounds to adopt a moratorium at this time. The town certainly can begin reviewing its current ordinances to address this issue and be prepared for when and if a new field would be constructed so that the field would be subject to the new regulations. There's also something that the ordinance committee can review and develop language on. With all that being said, the recommendation at this point would be refer both of these items to the ordinance committee to review, revise, and come back with recommendations for the council to consider. Also at the last council meeting, Mr. Otto raised questions regarding bulky item pickup as a service for the town, for residents, and the ending of the traditional pickup that ceased this past spring. After the meeting, I reviewed the current contract with Casella specific to bulky items. The town's contract states that our service provider does not have the ability to collect bulky waste at the curb, for their automated side load trucks do not have the ability to take on such items. However, the option that they offer as an alternative to curbside, which would be for the town to have a drop-off location or drop-off option, where residents can dispose of bulky waste items. Now, this would require residents to still find a way to bring bulky items to a designated location in town. So you couldn't, for lack of a better term, drag it to the curb and get it picked up. You'd have to find a way to get it into your car or truck and bring it to a town location. Now, there would be an additional cost for this service to the town for that, based on the disposal cost, container hauls, delivery of containers, and the labor the cost. Overall, the additional cost would be just under $47,500, but it is an alt add to the initial contract that the town currently has. The council may want to consider this as part of the fiscal year 26 discussions, versus now, as it currently is not included in this year's fiscal year budget. But when those deliberations take place, the council can definitely, and we can get a revised estimate at that point if it's something that the council would like to pursue. The model that they had was roughly 4 times a year that could take place on, you could choose 4 different Saturdays and approach it that way. But that's something, if you do want to explore, we could hang more on that skeleton.
Is that, is that 47,500 per year or per?
Annually.
Okay,
Annually. Yep, that would be
annually.
4.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Now, let's see, back to business. Please be advised that tomorrow, if you are planning to take Mill Road, do not take it. It will be closed tomorrow to through traffic at number 41 tomorrow only, but it's the culvert work that we will be doing over there. It's going to begin at 7:30, and the road will reopen as soon as possible.
What road does that matter?
Mill Road.
Mill Road.
Yep, so we're replacing a culvert there tomorrow, so it's going to be out of commission, at least from number 41 in each direction. So please plan accordingly. And then finally, as we are approaching election season, we have received some calls regarding election signs, and if they're okay to be up at this point in time. There are a number of signs that have been put up recently, and if they are on private property, this is perfectly legal. So we just wanted folks to understand that, and then we'll also advise in the future about the certain language that needs to be on election signs, and I think people are good about that, but you want to make sure that there's, as we get closer and closer to November, there is a heightened awareness, and so we want to make sure that folks have as much information as we can. So that is the extent of my manager's report this evening, Madam Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for taking action on all of those. I believe Mr. Vale has a question for you.
We talked privately, at least Ms. Thornton and myself, about PFAS, and recently we received an email from TIG about pesticide use, and I think that when the ordinance committee gets down to it, we might have a more encompassing conversation about pesticide, PFAS, and one of the things that it kind of leaped out of my mind with regards to PFAS is when you have a construction site and you have people with dump trucks bringing in material, you really have no idea where the material is coming from. And so one of those things I'd like to have a conversation, at least on the ordinance level, and then at the board level, is how we can identify that, whether we have any controls on it. But it's certainly something I'd like to have the conversation about going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this evolve in real time right now, as, you know, the testing standards that they have. Clean fill may not be the clean fill that we all grew up thinking it was anymore. So it is definitely a changing and evolving landscape quickly. So I think we'll see, at least from the state level as well, because I think it'll ultimately come down to a higher level regulation that we may need, instead of having, you know, 300 towns across the state with different standards. I think we'll see that evolve quite quickly. At least I hope so.
One of the things that jumps out at me is a lot of reclaim when you're selling reclaimed asphalt. You know, where'd it come from? And so, you know, when I go up to the quarries up there in Gray, I pretty much know where it's coming from. But other than that, there's certainly the question of where's this coming from.
Definitely so.
Oh, sure.
Matt, in your opinion, do we have, I was thinking of going back to the bulky waste, would we have room down Stiles Way to set up large?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, what you're probably talking about are probably the large, you know, basically the large cans.
Right.
You know, like the old, what we used to use for recycling for years, the hoppers. But Chris and I have talked about that. That'd probably be the best location, is to set up and then have the drop off there. That would be the most functional. It's town center.
How many cans do you think we could get in there? I mean, we could do 3?
3 or 4.
Yeah. And I'm just going through my mind what you're talking about. I mean, we did it, and when it fills up, you shut it down, and we do it another, if the council wants to, we could do it another date. But there are enough people and private businesses and to transport, somebody says, how am I gonna get a couch to?
Yep.
There's enough private businesses that would do it to get rid of it, and there's enough, like Boy Scouts could do it. I mean,
Yeah, if Councilor Reeds, that's a great point. I mean, if you knew that you had, you know, you knew you had that designated day, and you could pay for that, someone might pay a lot less to take it from, let's say, Country Charm to Stiles Way than they would to take it from Country Charm to Riverside.
right.
You know, that hauling cost is a lot, the trucking cost is just so much greater. So I mean, if you wanted to provide that option, we could do that, and that would probably be the most logical location.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep, you're welcome, sir.
All right. That's it for manager's report?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome sauce. Okay. Moving on to public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. We have a new timer up here. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. The reason we have a timer is because we got some feedback that people would just like to kind of know how much time is left. This is not here to be annoying. It's just so that I don't have to awkwardly interrupt you and the town manager doesn't have to awkwardly interrupt you. If anyone who's here tonight wants to come talk, come on up and you can be our new timer guinea pig. And here she is. Melissa, would you please just remind us who you are and where you live?
Sure. So Melissa Gattine, I live at 325 Main Street, and I am very happy to have the timer. So thank you. I appreciate it. So start.
There you go, Melissa.
Okay, so I wanted to make a couple comments related to the earlier discussion. First off, thank you guys for taking the time. I do appreciate it. I have to admit, I was a little worried early on in your discussion because there was a lot of statements like, it's what we need to do for business, it's good for business, it's what we do. And I would hope that the town council's mission, the town's mission as a whole, is more than just about what's good for business. So again, you guys got there, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I do just want to, there are a couple things that I would just, again, they're questions I think that for you guys they're questions that have been asked, and it would be helpful, I think, for you to figure out the answers. Why is this the only district or one of very few districts where there are town time limits. There was a very specific reason why that was, and it had to do with the increased residential density that was put in place right before this zoning change. So again, there's a reason why there was that. Why does the ordinance specifically say cafe and not restaurant or bar? And if you look at the ordinances from other parts of town, it says restaurant and bar. So why? You know, again, those are important questions that maybe they're not relevant now, 10 years later, but somebody thought that they were important questions and differentiations to make back then. So it just, you know, again, would encourage you to look at that piece of it. The trial run, you know, it's hard. Again, how would you measure it? So I appreciate, Tig, your comments about, like, you know, how do we do that? What does that actually look like? So I definitely think, I appreciate that people are thinking about that. And then, again, I just want to go back to, and I know that this came up again, it's like, why, the issue of enforcement of the ordinances. You know, again, it doesn't matter what you say the ordinances are if they're not being enforced. And, you know, in my opinion, they're not being enforced right now. And it's not about one business, but if any business can continue to function outside of those ordinances without any consequences, then it becomes a much bigger issue much faster. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, wait, can I add more one?
Of course, you've got
I
2 minutes.
I got 2 minutes left.
17 seconds
Okay,
left, go.
so actually, tonight was the first time that I actually did hear about the potential sale of the former gas station. That does actually really, like, concern me, because, again, who knows what that's going to be. You know, like everybody else, I'm struggling with, oh my God, I'm on E and I don't know where the fastest place to go get gas is. So I'd love it for it to be another gas station, but if it's not, what is it going to be? What's the impact on that going to be? And the fact that I just recently heard, and this is totally rumor, but it seems reasonable, that the place down by the railroad tracks is going to be reopening. As a bar, restaurant, pub type of thing. And again, like, how does that fit in the comprehensive plan? Like, how many hours do we need? What does that look like? And again, is that the third, you know, kind of space for people to be able to go without as much impact on local neighbors? So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other folks that like to comment? Yep, please come on up. And just, again, reminder, name and where you live.
My heart started beating when you put a timer up.
No, don't worry about it.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Raridan. I live on Oxford Lane in Cumberland. I also should identify myself as a planning board member as well. So that does fit into why I want to talk a bit about the workshop that you just had. And I wanted to say thank you to all the council members. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, and I appreciate the time that you've given to the town and how challenging your position is. So thank you for having the workshop. I just took notes during the workshop, so they're not in any particular order other than when things popped up into my head. One of the things that I did when I first joined the planning board is I read the comprehensive plan, because I thought it was important to have an idea of what did people expect the town to look like. And one of the things that struck me in the plan was people wanted a coffee shop / cafe so they could sit and get their coffee and read their newspaper. And they also were looking for a small food market, a small grocery store, so they wouldn't have to always drive to the Hannafords or the Shaws or whatnot. And that's kind of always been in the back of my head, because I'm kind of like, okay, we're waiting for you guys to come. Where are you? So I think the comprehensive plan does inform the town as to what citizens are looking for. And so I'm excited that you're doing that again and that we'll see what comes of that. I also, this was the first I heard of the gas station property going for sale, so that is something to keep in mind as to what potential business is going to go in there and what that would have as far as an impact into making a zoning change. I don't know, I don't have any insight into business models. I've never been a business owner, worked for the federal government, so that's a whole nother big ball game if you want to talk about money. But anyway, I'm not sure what Rise's business model is, but like I thought about Cumberland House of Pizza, which is in a zone that they could be open 24 hours, and they close at 9. So just another piece of information to kind of throw out there. One of the things we hear a lot about, and I know you guys hear about it, we hear it at the planning board, is the concern that Cumberland citizens have over the rise in property tax, and that seniors are concerned whether or not they can stay in their homes. And that seems to be a pervasive topic that comes over again and again. And one of the things, as Mr. Eads, you pointed out, one of the things that drives our property taxes down is a commercial tax base. And if we don't continue to look at that, then there is no real hardcore mechanism for lowering property taxes. And I think the only other way is, what are we willing to give up as town members? You know, what services are we willing to give up in order to get property taxes down? So that's a really hard nut to crack, but it's something to think about when we're talking about businesses and attracting businesses to come to Cumberland and what those businesses look like, and the comprehensive plan does inform that. As far as the trial run, I'm kind of not a big fan of it, and you know, no harm, no foul, but I struggle with how we would come up with objective, measurable outcomes to determine whether we change the zoning or we leave it as is. We'd have to be very careful of what those measurements would look like so that we all agree that it's either a success or it's not a success. The other thing I wanted to say in my last minute and 24 seconds is, you started the flash vote. You know, there was a big push for people to sign up for that. And rather than a referendum, I don't know if this is one of those things that you could put out there on the flash vote and get a little bit more data from people as to where their heads are at, because you tend to see the same people coming to the council meetings, the same people that maybe come to the planning board meetings, and you might get other people's inputs with that flash vote. So I'm not sure how that plays into decision-making, but I know that that's a tool out there for you. So anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Got 43 seconds. I
know.
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah, can you turn the heat down?
No, again, it's warm in here.
Keep down.
Is there anyone else that would like to comment? Yes, please come on up.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Curry, and I live at 321 Main Street, and I was here for your workshop, which I appreciate, just like Melissa said, taking the time to consider what would be good for the town and for the town center district. So thank you for your time and efforts. I had a question about the different kinds of businesses that are allowed on Main Street and in the town in general. Do you guys have any jurisdiction over what comes in? So Miss Melissa mentioned that there's another pub possibly going in, and we've got a pub, and we've got a pizza place. And is there any way for you guys to consider the variety of businesses that come in, or is it just, you know, whoever presents themselves and says, we would like to open a business, that you just say, okay? So that was mostly just a question for you. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Vail, if you.
I would respond to two things. No, we have ordinances, and anything that's allowed within the ordinance, a prospective business can make application for. And I would like to respond to Renee.
Lorraine. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Lorraine.
Yes, my fault. We as council members, we as citizens need to petition our state legislators to have reform of taxation we talk about these budget surpluses that happen year after year, and I think that, we need to push our legislatures to help us with some tax reform for our property tax.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make a comment? And sorry, Lorraine, for getting your name wrong.
No, it's so funny that you said her name, because I'm sure you guys don't know my sister.
You say that, but no. All right. Thank you all so much. Okay, moving on to legislation and policy. Opportunity for public comment. Per Article 2, Section 7 of the Town Charter, there will be an opportunity for public comment on each item on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. 24-090 to set the electronics drop-off event for October 12th and confidential shredding for October 19th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. At Public Works on 23 Drown Road. Another one of my favorite events of the year. We have, and kind of I think has been also communicated or will be communicated out, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And this is also a great alternative for, because we don't have bulky waste at this point anymore, opportunity for folks to get rid of computers, monitors, telephones, laptops, digital clocks, things like this. Please note that there are no Freon devices allowed. Big no to all of that. That's a little bit of context there. Mr. Manager, I don't know if I'm missing anything about this spectacular event that you wanted to touch on.
Right on the money, Madam Chair, especially in light of this day and age with personal security at a premium. It's a great opportunity to have that securely destroyed, and it's a great service for residents.
Yeah, watch out for the hackers. Any council discussion? Yes, Councilor Thorson.
I very much appreciate this because whenever the VA sends you something, your social is plastered on every single page. So I appreciate this. Also, it said Cumberland residents only. Is there a verification process for this, or is it honor system?
I think, yeah, usually they'll check licenses or even, it's like the old days with the transfer station or the dump, property tax bill, or if you have a utility bill, things along those lines, different ways. And then you can have it confidently shredded after you show them the evidence of the residency.
Great, thanks.
Denise, that was my question too.
Okay.
I love it.
But you're suggesting that they pay the tax bill first before it's shredded?
That's a whole different category, Councilor Magoon.
If you destroy the bill, it's still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Great. Any other discussion?
I can give you a motion.
I would love that.
I move to set the electronics drop-off event for October 12th and confidential shredding for October 19th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Public Works, 23 Drown Road.
Second. Wow. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Who made the second?
I did.
That's out of order. I second.
Fine. Please note, Brenda, that Councilor Vale has made the second. I don't even know why I'm sitting here. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? No one. Okay, unanimous, Brenda. See, I can count. I apologize, folks. I'm getting over COVID, so a little bit of brain fog.
Calm down, Bob.
I'm over it. All right. Moving on to 24-091 to consider an act on authorizing an increase in the non-resident library card fee from $40 to $65. We have received a note from Thomas Bennett, the director of the library, letting us know that there are roughly 41 non-resident members, and in order to continue the incredible service that they do provide at the library, they are suggesting that we increase the fee to $65. The $40 fee was from adopted in 2020, so 4 years later, adjusting to 65 is their recommendation in order to make sure that they can, serve their population. Any council discussion? I would ask if anyone from the public has a comment, but there's no one here. Any council discussion? Yes.
Just what's the meaning of non-residential? So is that anybody outside of Cumberland and North Yarmouth, or is that just Cumberland?
Correct, and I can verify, it's Cumberland and North Yarmouth, and I can verify that because I just went to renew my library card, and you have to provide proof of residence.
Okay. My second is, it is just a thought process. I know at one point the library used to charge for late fees, and they stopped doing that. And it almost seems that they're trying to make up fees for broadening that. So would it be better to go back to the late fee structure rather than trying to discourage people from outside of the residential area to, I'm just concerned that we make it the fee to a point where we're preventing children from reading because we're making the fee $65 rather than $40, and it becomes unaffordable for certain families. Rather than, instead of charging the people who are actually using it, maybe we bring back the late fee ability so that way they're getting their revenues through making sure people bring the books back on time rather than penalizing the people who actually want to use the library and increase the fee on them.
Councillor Thorson?
I don't think this is incorrect because it's in my brain, so I must have heard it somewhere, probably at the library. We had some late books because our son lost it, and then we found it and returned it and asked if there's a late fee, and they said, I think they said asterisk, like, don't quote me, this could be wrong, but that they did away with the fees because it was discouraging people from checking books out in the first place because they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to get it in on time, and then it's like afford the library fees and all that stuff. So I think there was an intention behind it, but I don't know what the situation is at this point. But there's a reason.
Mr. Sturgis, did you have a?
I'd be happy to assist on that, Madam Chair. Yeah, you've seen a lot of times in municipal libraries, they've gone away from the late fees, oftentimes because it served as a disincentive to bring the book back, period. They just find that after a while, it's almost like they get defeated and decide not to bring the book back. And the revenues that they generated from late fees was never really that great. So they had a higher chance of someone, let's just say, not guilt shaming, bringing the book back versus bringing it back in, 3 months later, they have, they clean Junior's bedroom up, and you find that it's tucked in underneath the mattress in the back side of the bedroom, and that's that's a classic thing. So, but on this side with 41 non-resident members, they may, may have multiple cards at different, they may be from Gray, for instance. I know we had, when our daughter was little, we had a card at Cumberland, we had a card at Falmouth because they were open on days that my wife didn't work and she could take there, but Gray was closed on those days. So that's they were taking advantage of the programming. So long story short, I think they're not trying to make up for the shortage and late fees. It's just more trying to make sure that those who are using the library are paying at an equal level to what Cumberland residents are currently contributing to the operation of the library. Just trying to make sure that they're on equal footing as the residents who are paying for it.
Councillor Douglas?
Sorry, one question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Matt, but why is this being addressed now? Kind of like post.
During budget.
Yeah, like why?
That was my
I know
question.
that, I mean, the money we're looking at here is, it's $1,000. It's not probably a big revenue generating opportunity for them, but just curious why this was flagged now and not
That
during
was going to be
budget
my
season.
next question.
Councilor Douglas, great question. It's Thomas brought it to me.
Okay.
The library director said, we were looking at our fees and realized that after reviewing it, that our per capita cost was X, and just felt, and he brought that forward as a recommendation, and felt it was probably something that they didn't look at during the budget process. That was a thought I had too, was why didn't you just look at it when you looked at all the other fees? But, I mean, if you wanted to put it off till then, you could put it off, you can make it to the effective as of next spring, or whenever you decided you'd like to do it, or if you wanted to do it now. But it was really just a question of equity is what his primary driver was.
Okay.
I would also, oh, go ahead. I would just also know, I actually sat down with Stacy Mazer from the library on Monday, and they are embarking shortly on a kind of a survey, almost like a mini comprehensive plan for the library. So if, you know, we wanted to suggest that maybe they look at late fees, they could do that as part of that. I mean, it's going to be a survey of both North Yarmouth and Cumberland, so all users of the library, and all of that is because they are looking at kind of understanding what people want out of the library, what they're using it for, what their priorities are. So I would think it would be kind of more appropriate to have any kind of dialogue around late fees kind of as part of that outreach, because it's more structured and we'll get a better kind of overview. And I think that well, of those 41 non-residents, of course we never want to be deterring, you know, anyone from reading. I think that as counselors for the town of Cumberland, it's incumbent on us to think about the residents who are using the library on a daily basis and kind of prioritize them, which is why I think that the $65 fee to continue kind of that high level of program is appropriate at this time. This is where I kind of sit on it. Councilor Magoon, did you?
I was just going to say, and I realize that this isn't really how stuff breaks down payment-wise, but of the population it serves and the budget, it comes out to $65.80 per resident. And so I think, you know, part of the reason is to bring that up to $65 for the non-residents, so they're paying technically a little bit less, but, you know, $1 less to use it as opposed to $25 less to use the same services. So I think that's a lot of why they're looking at it. I don't know about the timing of it, but, you know, if you do the math, it's $65 and like 80 something cents per resident to use for the library services, and this just brings it up to that for the non-residents.
Okay. Any other thoughts, or is there a motion on the floor, or?
I would give you a motion. Go ahead.
I thought there wasn't, never mind, I was thinking motion before, go ahead.
Yeah, I would give you a motion.
All ears.
I move to authorize an increase in the non-resident library card fee from $40 to $65.
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Vail?
I think that when I read the application earlier in the week, you know, I was fairly comfortable with that, just rubber stamping the increase. But I think hearing Helene's comments and everybody else's, I'm a little less to jump on board with the increase. I will vote for it, but I think that I think we need to have a thorough review, or a more greater in-depth review of cost. I think with talking about the library expansion and reviewing that. So I think there's a number of things that pertain to library issues that need to be reviewed. And certainly this is the one that it's a very small piece of a budget, but it's a substantial increase from $40 to $65. And I think Helene's point is well taken that, you know, some parent may be coming in for books for their children. I guess we'll look at this at a later date, but it did give me a little bit of pause.
Sure.
If I may, Madam Chair, to Councilor Vera's question, I think with the strategic plan that the library is going to be undertaking, I think that's a whole element of the universe of items that they'll be looking at as well. And then the expansion that they have this year going into Minerva and having that access to a lot, it'll be huge. I know Gray's had that for a long time in their library. New Gloucester's never had it. in their library. So we get a lot of crossover there because they get expansion to a vastly expanded selection or catalog of books to choose from. So I think those will all be elements that they'll flesh out as well in their strategic planning process.
I also want to remind the council that about 2 years ago, when we were reviewing the budget for Minerva, the library received a substantial increase in their budget to cover those costs, as well as the additional staffing that it was going to take to get there. So I hesitate for us to just, in the middle of, we're here now almost in September, and the budget's been approved back in March, and now we're asking to add another $1,000. And how do we know we're even going to, is that really going to break their budget for us to do this now at this point in time? I just have more concern. I'm more wanting to make sure that we're encouraging reading than we are about trying to collect $1,000. Just want to put it out there.
Any further discussion? I think it'll be really interesting to see, especially since Minerva does launch tomorrow, and that is going to be all around kind of the book sharing, so more access for everybody, right, to different titles across the board. So I think it'll also be interesting to see post-rollout how that data changes, because if, say, and I think that we don't have enough information about the 41 non-resident members, right? We don't know if they're kids, we don't know who they are, right? It's just a number. But what I think would be, and maybe gets tacked on to their strategic plan, is that we know that with the rollout of Minerva, that increases people's access to books across the board, right? So those 41 people or anyone that's rolling out Minerva now can access, I actually have some of the info from Stacy. You're accessing the Colby Bates and Bowdoin libraries. You're accessing, University of Maine. Everything expands, right? And so I think that it would be also helpful to kind of look at the data again after we've rolled that out, and also after they've done that, to see kind of what those larger patterns are. But for now, I think that it's a reasonable request for the 40 to 65, particularly after Andrew's kind of done the math. But that's just me. Any other?
So I have a question based on that.
Sure.
So if we roll out Minerva, and say, I live in Portland and I want to check out a book in Cumberland, does that mean I need to have a non-resident library, or does that mean that I can just check out a book because I'm going on the Minerva system through my library in Portland to pick up that library here in Cumberland? So then what would be the point of then increasing the non-residential fee also then, if everyone across the state will be able to access our books without the additional cost?
Yes, it's a great question, Councilor Bartolomeo. Yeah, if you've got a Portland Library card, you can go on there. If they don't have it there, they can find it on Minerva if it's there, if they're a participating library, and then they'll put it in a tote and it gets shipped to that library. And it could be someone in Medibemps or Holton, for that matter, same as someone in Cumberland. So that's all part of that network of sharing. So that person wouldn't actually have to get a Cumberland library card, and they wouldn't have to drive to Cumberland. They could stay right in Portland.
So then what would be the point of increasing the fee if now everyone has access to the same library, that from border to border, and then we're persecuting the 41 who want to come in and just go to the actual library?
To the contrary of that argument, it would be that the citizens of North Yarmouth and Cumberland are paying $800,000+ a year and $65 a head to support the library, whereas if someone lives in another community, they're coming in and they're paying $40 a head, $40 for their membership. So the residents are paying that through their tax bills.
Right.
And so, in a sense, they're subsidizing someone else. They're getting the same level of service for $25 less per month than the residents are already paying. So we're just trying to find equity between the folks who are living in Cumberland and supporting it versus the 40 who aren't.
I understand what you're saying, but introducing Minerva changes that whole structure, because now you're allowing anybody to access the books of the town without a fee at all. So that's my only point.
Yeah.
I think the point would, and maybe I'm not understanding correctly, is like you have to belong to some library to get access to Minerva. So it's like if you
participating
a participating library. So like say you live in Gray, for example, and the Gray Library doesn't have access to Minerva. So you can either pay to be a member of Cumberland's library and get access to Minerva. So it's like you're not, and their per resident cost might be less than Gray. I think if we were looking at the model of what we did for resident, non-resident, it would actually be more than $65, because if you look at the model of like our rec program, we charge $10 to $15 more for non-residents. So it's like, this to me is just bringing this up to market rate. I recognize, like, I don't want to, obviously just push away anyone that is looking to read or looking to have access, and I'm sure there's programs in place through the library, which I'm happy to dig in more from a research perspective to understand what they're doing to offer opportunity for those that don't have access. However, I think, bringing it up to market rate is not necessarily a bad thing. The timing is a bit weird, for sure, but it's not going to deter my decision on this.
Any further discussion? Counselor Vail?
Point, counter, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. I vacillated back and forth, but I am swayed by the manager's comments of the cost being
Bringing it to market.
the cost benefits to the communities of Cumberland and North Yarmouth. So I will vote in the affirmative of the motion,
Thank you. Any other comments?
even though I agreed with you.
All right, I'll call for a motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, unanimous, Brenda.
Just wanted to bring the point across, that's all.
All right. Okay, 24-092, to authorize the issuance of senior property tax assistant program payments. I know this is Manager Sturgis's favorite day of the year, so I'm going to punt over to you to tell us all about, or actually favorite days, plural, of the year. So we'd love to hear about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This, once again, has been a great success for the community in providing targeted property tax relief to residents of town. At the present time, as of today, Paige Thoreau had reported out 192 tax-paying residents have qualified thus far to receive reimbursements from the program. That was a total, as of today, allocation of $105,576 for an average refund of $550. And also, there were 22 renters, because renters also qualify, and they qualified to receive $11,550 in a total to date, for an average of $525. It is an outstanding program. It's great community outreach, where I know we get the chance to sit down. It's the quickest part of it is going through the application and filling that out and making sure they qualify and figuring out. The best part of it is the opportunity to chat with residents and see how they're doing, and to have that time. And it's just a great community outreach, and it's very much appreciated after spending a couple, 3 days just sitting down with folks and going through it. It's a great program. People love it, and that's why we're bringing it here tonight, to authorize the town to go forward and start cutting these checks, because we'd like to get them out by the start of September.
Great. There's no one from the public, so anyone from the council, anything? Yeah, sure, Helene.
I wasn't here during the budget process. I was just wondering, what was the set-aside that the town did to pay this? Do you know that?
I think it's 130,000.
130.
So right on target, but it will grow. The one point that was brought up to me was for the council in the future to consider possibly in FY '26, budget process is the opportunity to perhaps expand the eligibility requirements from, or at least pulling back about 5 years from 70 years of age to 65 years of age, to expand that qualifying age. But all things else being the same, as far as, community residency for 10 years, the income requirements being where they're at. So that's just one point that had been brought up by a couple different folks. Is there an ability to perhaps expand the eligibility on the age side of it? This year's been a tough one, I will say, just because of a lot of folks who are in that 65-plus age group. This year had everybody received their tax bills last week, and they received 2 years' worth of bump because they had the tax freeze program that the legislature pulled the rug out from underneath on, and so there was 2 years' worth of percentage increases that took place. So those who had the stabilization program saw a greater increase this year due to that. So this couldn't have better timing to get those checks out there to folks. But yeah, that's been a tough one. But that might be something to consider in the coming year.
And that language, that's written like, is that like charter ordinance? How's that language? Ordinance?
Yes, Counselor.
So it's just something we probably want to look at for next year.
Yeah, do you recall if LD 290, was it 65 or was it 70? The state I thought was 65.
I think it's 65.
65, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Whitney's nodding her head. Okay, great. I think Councilor Thorson, were you poking at me or is,
He's
all right.
first
Councilor
this
Magoon.
With the quicker finger.
Matt, can you just go over the requirements, but then how does it break out so the average is 551 and all, because it's not the full tax bill. So like, how does it break out to say, all right, we're doing this percentage of it for you, but this percentage of you, or is it just a flat percent that we do for everybody, and the differences are just their tax bills?
Sure. No, great question, Councilor Magoon. Thank you for that. There's two different categories. There's the first part that they have, and that's up to a $250 maximum refund on that most qualify for. And then from there, below, and the next part is up to $550, and that's means-based. So folks can earn different categories of income limits. Within at one level it's $550 for $10,000 greater. In the next window, it's let's say $450, $350, and then ultimately it comes down to once you get over a certain threshold, then it may just be the $250 that you receive. A lot of people are receiving $750. Or they're going to receive $250. So that the $250 kind of bounces out, but a lot of folks in the $750 range, they would receive the max, because $750 was the maximum. So that's been, but the average is, I just took basically the number of the total amount that we had granted and by the gross number.
So the first, or the second bit is income, or means tested. Effectively, what's the first bit to, like, what does decide whether you get 150, 250, 200?
Oh yeah, the first part was based on the increase in their taxes from year over year.
Okay.
So a lot of folks, especially this year with the seniors who were in the stabilization program, that's why a lot of folks had came out the door with at least 250, just because everybody qualified on that side of it.
Councilor Thorson.
A little background on my question. When the big PDF of tax bills came out, I just, did a find on the exemption, and there were only a little over 2,000 who had a homestead exemption. And so that had me wondering, how many people just don't know about the homestead exemption anyways. I know we have a lot that probably don't qualify because, primary residence, Cumberland, that kind of thing. But on this, I know we probably have the data of the requirements as far as age, homestead, 10 years. The income, of course not. But do you know how many fall into that category as far as maybe like a gap of people who aren't applying? Like I said, we can't know the income to, this many people qualify but aren't applying. But I'm just curious about that. Is that something that we have info on?
I may have to, Councilor Thorson, thank you for the question. It's, I think that may need a more specified sort, because this year all the exemptions were combined. So you'd see on the exemption, if it was, I think 19.5 was the gross number.
Yeah.
If you received, let's say, the homestead exemption and perhaps the veterans exemption.
Right.
Or if it should have been 16.5 if you just received the homestead exemption. So I think there may be a better sort that's needed to be done on that
Yeah.
John Brushwine could do, because
Okay.
it's, because I think there's more than 2,000.
I was just looking for
Just the
the
exemption.
16 is what
Yeah.
it was, and not the combination
And
of
so
both.
that's,
So yeah, that would be
so
good.
my
info
guess
to
is
have.
it's probably closer to 70% participation rate.
Okay, cool.
Would be my thought. You know, it's probably 4,000 plus or minus parcels, maybe
Okay.
4,400 parcels in that range. So my guess is probably 70%, because folks are really good at that.
Right,
We try to
getting money
publicize
off
the heck
it
out of
as
it, yeah, because you can,
Yeah.
especially once they maxed it out over a number of years ago.
Okay.
But people are really good at it. But I can get that, I can follow back up and
Okay.
give you the gross numbers on that.
Is your question then sort of leading to if we can find that, should we be proactively sending out, letters to people that we know have the exemption, we know meet the age requirement, and that we know that they've been here for at least 10 years. We don't know their income, but basically, you may, sending a postcard or something like that, a mailer, is that sort of where you're
Well,
going, or you just?
I wasn't going to the mailer. I was just curious, and then the free version of like a crier ad, perhaps, something like that. For
More,
the
well, I'm
next
saying
time
like more
around.
targeted of like.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm just
individually-
curious on the numbers. Like, do we know how many qualify based on those things minus the income? I'm just curious. I don't know if you do anything with that information, but I'm curious about participation really, and wondering if people know and know. I mean, it's in the crier, it's everywhere. Like, come, we'll help you with applications, but just reaching everyone that we can, basically.
I think I would imagine that also Devin makes all of the folks in the active living programs incredibly educated. Because the big thing on all of these senior tax programs, which was drilled into all of us by former counselor Shirley Story King. Shirley, if you're watching, this is a nod to you. But she would always remind us that these programs you have to apply every single year, over and over. Just because you applied last year doesn't mean you're going to get it this year, right? So I think that I do know that Whitney and Devin have kind of really made a process of that to make sure that folks that it's being advertised, that it's being talked about, that reminders are being sent out. Of course, we can always do more. And I think that it'll be really interesting to see what that data looks like on the homestead, and whether or not, one of us can volunteer to wear like a sandwich board at the, maybe at the farmer's market or something to, make sure people know what resources and tools are available to them. But I think that your point about the proactive communication is really well taken. Other thoughts? Mr. Vale.
I have lots of thoughts. We can't just sit here and keep the lights on. And we can't just sit here and plow the roads. We kind of have a perfect storm setting up for us. We have a reevaluation coming this year, and we have a new school coming on board. And both of those things are going to have an impact. Reevaluation doesn't necessarily mean a negative or a positive impact, but it's going to have an impact. The school is going to impact everybody. The thing that we as counselors need to do is to, one, direct you, Matt, to reach out to other town managers across the state, and particularly in Cumberland County. We need to reevaluate how we get our tax dollars from the state. We need to direct the state to re-examine essential programs and services, because that model no longer works. And while we're talking about municipal government, the fact of the matter is the tax burden is a tax burden on every single one of us. And how we get an allocation from the state, it was earlier mentioned that the more property that you have in commercial it offsets you. Conversely, if those of you would follow this closely, we are a high receiver of state aid, more so than other communities who have much greater commercial base than we do. So I guess my point is, we have to make sure that we hold our legislative representatives' feet to the fire and haul them in here occasionally and say, what are you doing to re-examine how we tax citizens? And some of it is as simple as saying, all right, you reach 75 years old, your taxes are frozen. That's something the state can do, and those, we need to push for change in programming. I'll get off my soapbox.
I like it, but we can invite them here. We don't have to haul them in. Any other discussion? All right.
I like to haul them.
Is there, we know, is there a motion on the floor?
I can give you a motion. I move to authorize the issuance of senior property tax assistance program payouts.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Okay, next up, 24-093, to appoint members of the Board of Adjustments and Appeals. Over to Counselor Eads, who is the chair of the nomination committee. Tell us your story.
We had an opening in the Board of Adjustments and Appeal, and we only had 2 candidates apply, but I would tell you, I think the 3 of us on the committee were very impressed with their credentials. It's just another good appointment by people that want to get involved. And as I did with the last appointment, this, I feel that the committee really, we're putting the right people in the right places. So I think the 2 candidates are more than qualified, and we'll be very happy. I think they'll get the job done
Great.
when needed.
If there is no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I can give you a motion. I move to appoint Lagaya Atwood and Michelle Greco to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Of course.
Of course there is. You gonna haul these people in too, Bob?
I've really enjoyed the people that serve on this committee, because they typically are there for 30-plus years. And I'm reminded of Bob Robinson, who was the moderator before we became a council form of government at town meeting. And the man was renowned for his use of the English language. He just had a silver tongue. And anyways, I'm sure these ladies will be there for a long time, and I wish them well.
Love it. Any other discussion? All right, we will call for a vote. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Okay, great. Unanimous, Brenda.
Sorry.
All right, next up, 24-094, to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent taxes in the amount of $14,655.57 for tax years 2023, and 2024, and for the first half of 2025, and to prepare and execute a release deed on property tax identified as map R07, lot 67. So this typically is sort of a good news scenario, right? Is that we've been able to kind of work with the resident and kind of set up a payment plan. I think that's what former town manager Shane used to get very excited about, is being able to work with folks during periods of stress. Is that a fair assessment?
In this one, Madam Chair, great question. It's a question of a property being sold, and it had outstanding taxes, and so this would bring them all the outstanding taxes current, as well as through the first half of this year. So it is a good thing for them and everybody. So it's congratulations on selling your home, and now you can sell it with a clear title once the council decides that they'd like to vote in favor of letting this go forward. So, but it makes them whole, makes the town whole, and frees the property up for new folks to move into town.
Question.
Councilor Thorson.
I have a question on this. It says, oh God, where'd I go? Releasing the deed for transfer upon receipt of the full payoff amount. And then it says here that the final installment would be due on March of 2025. Does that mean that it won't be released till March, or are they free to like sell their house now? Like, what is the timeline on that?
Thank you, Councilor Thorson. Great question. What it does is, that's the second half tax bill of the current year.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be so ultimately, you're looking at the responsibility of the current owners all the way through up until the first half due date. So the second half, in a sense, would be the responsibility of the new owners. So they're free and clear at that point in time. We'll do a release deed that signs the town off from its interest that we had from any outstanding taxes that may have gone to lien, and then it would have ripened. So we have to just, and by ripened, I mean it aged out to the point that it became a firm document, versus you have a window of redemption also within that is kind of like a get out of jail free card. At this point, it's a hard copy that needs to be released.
Okay. I like your metaphor.
Councilor Vail?
If I'm correct, after 2 years of delinquency, the property is actually the town's property.
18 months. Yep.
So if this property is being sold, how much are we losing on the deal?
Councilor Vail, that's a great question. The laws have changed recently within the past 2 years, whereas towns ultimately, if you were to, like, if the town took, like, this is you're really going into the deep books with me on this. So if the town was to let the lien ripen fully, and then the town took ownership of the property due to foreclosure, due to non-payment of taxes, and then decide it wanted to sell it on the open market, the town would be eligible to receive the amount of taxes that were due, as well as some expenses that were related to that, plus interest. And then the remaining amount would have to be transferred back to the owner of record at the time of the sale. So back in the day, a town, you had a lot to lose if your property was foreclosed on due to non-payment of taxes, because the town would hold it, and then they would decide they'd want to sell it, because oftentimes people didn't let a property go to foreclosure that they had a high amount of value in. So, but nowadays the law has changed, so the town wouldn't keep all the proceeds. You have to return it to the owner who lost it.
So on some level, we've lost the incentive for people to pay their taxes.
Outside of the interest rate that's charged, that the town does, yes, yeah, as much. It depends. I mean, but yeah, the rules of the game have changed significantly now.
I remember that, but
Yeah.
now I realize that.
But it's still the interest rate. The interest charges and penalties are pretty much what the town can now pull in a sense. So you don't have the sword of Damocles as much. It's more like the the pen knife of Damocles now.
Don't give him any ideas.
You should write a book.
Just kidding.
I'll give you a motion.
Oh, okay, there's a motion.
I move to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent taxes in the amount of $14,655.57 for tax years 2022, 2023, 2024, and the first half of 2025, and to prepare and execute a release deed on property identified as tax map R07, lot 67.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
So I might have lost my chance to sort of ask this question, but I'll ask anyway. Matt, can you explain the difference in the interest due in the percentage? Because in FY22, it's 9% or so, and then the interest due there was $255 on a say $2,800 tax bill. And then in 23, the interest due was $2.18 on a almost $4,300 tax bill. And in 24, it was $40.85 on a $4,500 tax bill. And sort of, A, there's a wide variation there, and B, and I might be mixing things up, but we recently approved some interest rate for delinquent taxes, and the history there was not that varied, from like less than 2% up to 9%.
Thank you for the question, Counselor. That's a great question. I think ultimately, there may have been payments that were being made that offset it over time, so the principal may not have been as great as you went over times, but you did have to apply it towards the oldest. As you remember, last month when they did approve that, it went towards the oldest debt, so my guess is that the payments that were being made along that time may have had the impact on that, whereas the 1 year where it was at 9%, yeah, you could see the 250 on that tracks in relationship to the outstanding. Then the other one would have been a year that they may have made payments, but it didn't completely offset it.
Well, because, the total due is still, for all of these, is the amount billed plus interest, so it's all principal plus interest.
Yeah.
It's just the interest is wildly different.
Varying.
The oldest one is the highest, which is I'm just confused as to, even with payments, if the interest goes to the oldest payment, then that should be the lowest one, and that's the 9%.
Thank you.
Bill back in FY22, whereas FY23, it's $2.18 in interest on a not quite doubled, but still significantly higher tax bill from 22 to 23. Went up by over $1,000. Yet the interest is not even a tenth, like 1% of what it was. So it just seems like there's a story there that I'm not seeing from this, one printout of why that varied. I don't know if we're not getting the, full interest, or if there's, like you said, there's something else that's going on that I'm just not seeing.
My guess is there's something else going on in the background that now that I got a chance to look at the same page that I'm not aware of on that on the 23 at $2.18. I'm not sure about that. Because in 24 it was $40.85. And they did make they did make a payment on March 15th oh, sorry, no, my bad on that. That's what's due in March of 25. I may have to follow up and give you after I talk with collection tomorrow, just do that, but I'd still recommend going forward with releasing this and getting that done, and tonight, just to get it off.
If we can get almost 15,000 versus, a
Right.
few bucks in interest, I'll take the win.
Yep, but I can get I can get expanded as to what's going on. I don't know what math is going on in the background between column, basically A and column C on that, so I can find that out and circle back tomorrow, but I would recommend going forward with it and doing the discharge now, and then we can get the cash out of the way and zero the account out, but I'll give you a thorough explanation tomorrow after I get a chance to grab collection.
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Woo! Okay, new business time. Starting over on the left, Counselor Eads.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple things. Following up from tonight, I did like the suggestion related to business hours. Maybe get a feeling from the flash vote. I think that was a really good suggestion. That would, it can be done easily, really no expense, and we get an idea where people are coming from. I want to give condolences to Roger Borelli, who worked at Valhalla for 15 years off and on. He passed away playing his favorite game. A very valiant effort by town staff, Toby, and 2 of our police officers and rescued, try to save him. But he passed away, very well thought of down to Valhalla, and our condolences to the family. The last thing I have is, I'd like to see sometime in the future that we as a council get together, either a workshop or send it to the ordinance. We talk about, one thing that came out of the referendum over here was, maybe is there something that we can do? And I'd like to see us talk about maybe being more flexible on ADDs, talk about reduce lot sizes in the congested areas of town, and look at, how we can help address some of this housing shortages, other than doing something that was proposed over here. I think there are ways that we can expand our housing stock through apartments and do it responsibly. So I'd like to see that discussed in the near future. That's all I have.
Thanks, Mike. Councilor Magoon?
It's a good thing Whitney's here because I had a question for her. With the flash vote, I like, to echo Councilor Eads, I think this would be a good thing to use it for, just to get another data point for us. But do we have an idea of how close we are to getting that enough people signed up that we can have the sample size that we would need to actually get a legitimate response that wouldn't be too skewed in one way or the other?
Yeah, we are over 400 people signed up right now. The only thing left to do, and actually I was emailing with Kevin from Flashvote earlier, the only thing left to do is to send some targeted text messages. And my hesitancy with that has just been that, people will think that that's a scam coming through to them. So I just need to get out some information. It will be in this week's crier, and it will be on our social media. I'm going to send it out to staff tomorrow so PD knows if they get phone calls that that's actually coming from us, and see if there's some way that he can get that signed, for lack of a better term, by me, so that people will know, at least recognize a name of a town staff member that it's coming from. So this is a great opportunity to say we will be sending targeted text messages from databases that Flashvote has access to try to ramp up a little bit of our younger population. Older population is the majority of what we have. But he does still think we have a pretty good pool going. I mean, over 400 people from across town. So, if we can come up with some, and I can talk to him tomorrow about what we can come up with for kind of unbiased, generic questions about business hours or commercial ordinances or however you guys want to do that, and kind of get back with Matt and with you on, what those questions will look like. And it would be great to get our first survey out there so people can see how it works and you can see what the results look like, and we can actually see how many of those 400 people respond.
Do we know if Flashvote will always come from the same number? So people can then put it in as a contact into their phone, like, all right, like this is actually Flashvote, as opposed to this is some random link that I'm getting from somebody.
It's my understanding that it should. I will confirm that before our first survey goes out, because we definitely need to I would like to give people a more specific, this is exactly what this is going to look like, especially before the first one goes. But yes, it's my understanding that that people should be able to know this is exactly where it's coming from. That said, it may not be the same number that I have advertised thus far as the number that you call to sign up. I would assume it's going to be different from that. So I'll try to get that so people can have that information too.
Great, that's it for me.
So one question, Whitney. It's like summertime. Sometimes people are away. And so I was just curious whether or not, especially for really ramping this up, right? If you see like less open rates during August, and whether or not it makes sense to do like a
one last push for people to sign up. Maybe now that like school's starting back up again, we're all, not away at camp. I was just curious if there's any data kind of around that and whether or not that would make sense.
Yeah.
And also with the like re-education of, hey, this is flash vote. These are the numbers, and also like preparing for this first question's going to come out, which maybe we also want to think about doing like an easier question, or not that Mike, you was saying that the first one has to be on Rise, but it might be good to do something that's a little like,
It doesn't. I'm just saying.
right? Get it right? Because the first one, there might be, it's good to do kind of like a low ball one for, in case there are issues that we don't foresee.
Yeah. We can definitely kind of talk that through and figure it out. I would guess that they're going to tell us to wait at least until we get past Labor Day. That's really the only time that I find that we have lower open rates on the crier. We're very fortunate. We have a over 70% open rate every single week. The only time that I see less than that is when like the crier falls on a holiday. So Thanksgiving, if Christmas falls on Thursday, those sort of things. But typically people will open it later. So we're very, very fortunate. I'm very excited that people continue to open it and look for things. Summertime doesn't seem to make a huge difference, but I know myself personally, the first week of school is probably not our target best week to send things out. If we look into September a little and we kind of figure out what those questions could be, whatever you guys want to do, we could certainly do kind of a ease into it and show people how the survey looks, or we could do something that gives you some real data to work with. It's
So
really up to you.
What is the meaning of life? For
Yeah.
our first question.
Yeah, I think we should start with that.
Okay, super. Thank you, Whitney. And congratulations on your open rate. Councillor Douglas, what's going on?
Just another thought while I'm thinking. My brain's still working. Not to add to your plate, but I wonder if like even just like a paper handout at the farmer's market or something, just like it as another touch point, or like QR code scans at the front desk or something, posted up. If you're still kind of chasing another demographic of people, but I don't know where you're at from like a numbers perspective on the lower end. Otherwise, nothing new to report on my end right now. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Vale.
I had written myself a little note after Mike, or Andrew's question there, test survey. So I think we're all in agreement that we ought to have some sort of a test. And I make no excuses for those people who are on vacation. Read your email, get involved. The world is going to pass you by. Don't just get out there and get involved. I make notice of Fred Kinney's wife, Jeannie, who passed away. Thank you for sending flowers. Very appropriate. So often we know somebody, a husband or a wife, and we say, what a remarkable person that was. But a lot of us never know the backstory. And with most spouses, there is an equal or even better partner at home that is not only keeping the fires going, but is providing direction. And I know for a fact that was the case in that family there, that there was a partnership and it just wasn't one. But anyways, my condolences to Fred. I had one other thing, yes. So I'm kind of following on what Mike said about housing. I'd like us to consider doing a little bit of an exercise and engaging a landscape architect or an artist or somebody to draw a conceptual plan of what Stiles Way might look like with a train station and some affordable housing. And I don't think it needs to have a lot of detail, but I think it would be helpful for us to take a look at that and say, this is what something might look like down there. We can have a mental exercise amongst ourselves, or we can just let somebody else go wild and say, all right, 50 units, 75 units, 100 units. But I think it's a good exercise for us to start conceptualizing because the need hasn't gone away, and we need to move ahead. And as I said once, I'm the accelerator, and some of you guys are brakes, but we're all going to do this together. So anyways, that's all I've got.
Love it. Counselor Thorson.
All right, so we had a fun time on Saturday at the Star Party at Twin Brook, put on by the library with the Southern Maine astronomers. It was amazing. Usually, I can't get my kids to, care about something for more than 5 minutes, but they were rolling down the hill, having fun with other kids, and then we just laid on a blanket and looked up, and they laser pointed all the different constellations, talked about them. They were very interested. They had some really nice telescopes there where you could see star clusters. So that was really cool. And it's, oh God, I forgot. Is this the second year, third year, fourth year? But it'll go on again next year. So I encourage anybody to go. There was toots, and it was free. And there were teens handing it out. It was great. It was a good time. So yeah, one more reason why our library is sweet. What else? Oh. Sorry, one moment. Oh yeah, I wanted to follow up on the new resident handout and orientation, if we have anything for that yet, or if we're still kind of planning.
In the planning stages, but I think we're looking to do it towards the end of September.
Cool. And I'm curious, when we do that, do we have representatives from things around town, maybe maybe a volunteer organization looking for more people, or the LCC looking for people on the committees, or something like that?
That's the plan.
Okay.
It's a good opportunity to recruit and raise awareness for what different groups do in town. So
Okay.
that's kind of our hope, that
Cool.
folks can see that and get oriented to see what's available for them to enrich their lives in town.
All right. Also, get them to sign up for Flash Vote.
That too. That too.
And then, not ready to completely talk about this topic yet in full, but mentioned ordinance stuff regarding, Bob was talking about Phil as far as PFAS goes, and PFAS and turf was linked together there. I want to make it super duper clear that when I'm talking about turf, I'm not talking about PFAS only, I'm talking about microplastics, which is something you don't need to test for, and it's something that is very pervasive. So, yeah, anytime I mention turf going forward, equally as important to me as the PFAS portion is the microplastics portion. So that's it.
Counselor DiBartolomeo. Did I say it right?
No. Di Bartolomeo.
DiBartolomeo.
I think we need to schedule a workshop.
Yeah.
Okay.
DiBartolomeo.
Sure.
We just chant
Did I
it.
say it too fast?
I
I
think
think you
so.
flipped the L and the B.
DiBartolomeo.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there you go.
That's what I said.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
It's
okay.
okay.
will
I forgive
slow
you.
down.
I wanted to ask, what does it take to add a committee to, if we wanted to, how does it work? Because right now we have a finance committee, and actually want to entertain the idea of not only having a finance committee, but also having an audit committee, which is very different than a finance committee. I think that when we look around the country, or within even the state of Maine, we see where a lot of organizations wait till it's too late to find out that they could have made some changes and reviewed policies and internal controls that are taking place within their organization. So I'd like to see if there's any interest from the rest of the council into adding an audit committee to our committee list.
If you teach me how to do it. Sounds interesting.
Eileen, in your prior position with the town,
Yes.
weren't you the auditor? Weren't you?
No, sir. I was the finance director.
Right.
And we have an auditor. As for the town, the town is audited annually, but the internal controls that they review is just enough to determine whether or not the financials should be acceptable. but they don't go to a deeper level that an audit committee can go into in regards to reviewing the actual policies that employees are practicing within the organization to ensure that we safeguard the finances of all of the collection agencies within the town, as far as like Valhalla, the recreation department, the clerk's office, the finance department. This is to ensure that, you know, these things are being followed like with a rule. And make recommendations for changes to ensure that if there is a gap in that internal control, because auditors, again, won't provide any recommendations unless they feel it's egregious enough, that they feel there's a concern for your financial report, that they would make a recommendation.
I'm intrigued. I'd be interested in learning more.
Yeah.
I'd be interested, is this something that you've seen with other municipalities, Mr. Sturgis, or, sorry to put you on the spot.
No, Madam Chair, it's not a problem at all. It's a good question. I have not seen it, but it's been in Cape we didn't have it. The Finance Committee and the council ultimately served in many ways of that. But as Councilor Di Bartolomeo did state, oftentimes it's the annual review of the audit by the council when it goes over the end results with that. So I'm happy to research it, see what other towns have and what the structure would look like if there was something along the lines that and I can report back as to what I find from that. I don't think there are bad things to be done there, or you could. I think there's a lot of good that could come from that, because the audit ultimately is just looking at the year end and looking at a lot of like those things and Councilor Di Bartolomeo will understand this too, because she's walked a mile in these shoes. But most towns are going to look at that your checks and balances and your segregation of duties, and oftentimes some part of the challenges you'll find is personnel and not having enough for some of those things. Most towns get flagged for that because they only have so many folks who can do that. But I'd be happy to come back with more information on that and see what I can find, or what others may do. They may not call it the same thing, but there may be a functionality of other options in town. So, but I'm more than happy to do the research on that and come back.
Matt, I
for
can't
sure.
think of, I work with a lot of agencies, county and state, all over the state. I can't think of anybody who has that.
Augusta has it.
Nobody.
The city of Augusta has an audit committee. You'll usually find that also with school districts. I don't know about here, but in Florida, where I went to my school district, we had an audit committee. We actually had an internal auditor who would review the things that I did in my finance department to ensure that we were following protocol. It's just a healthy thing to do so that you're not waiting till something's gone wrong to determine that you could have done something about it ahead of time.
I think Councilor Douglas had her finger up first. So
Yeah,
you can go next.
I was just going to say, we have something like that in place in the business I'm in. It's just called a finance or a budget committee it's like budget committee oversight. So it's a level, a group of executives who essentially you present your budget to, also in tandem with finance, and essentially like dig into kind of those line items to ask those kind of prodding questions to make sure you're all aligned on like the scope and the goals of the business overall. I think it's probably not,
Yeah, this
it's
would be
less,
over policy and internal controls.
Yeah, internal controls. So I guess my question to you would be more so like, to your point, policy and internal controls. So like, for example, we have, policy or rules and regulations in place where like, directors and above can only authorize spending over $10,000 or like above anything over this. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, correct. We're
Like-
just making sure those things are actually happening and that we're, seeing that, I mean, they also use the credit card and making sure
Yeah.
the rules that were put in place for credit card are being followed.
Yeah, and education surrounding that too, like understanding, are you tax exempt?
Right.
How do you utilize those tax exemptions when purchasing online, things like that.
Correct.
So more so, it's almost like ordinance, but for a finance committee would be my
Correct.
understanding
That
of
would
it.
be a perfect explanation.
Yeah.
After your finger, I have a finger. All right, Counselor Vale, then Counselor Thorson, and then maybe Mr. Sturgis.
On a personal note, my wife was president of the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce for 2 years, and I remember while she was there, she instituted some policy changes which were essentially auditing of how they conducted their business, and there was some significant changes that made it, and you know, I appreciate your thought there about you know, who has the purse strings, who has a limit. You know, those are important things, and I guess I really never thought about it on the municipal level.
It's almost like a compliance.
Yes.
Compliance would be the right word, right?
Yes, I guess
Yeah.
that's. But it's an intriguing idea.
Counselor Thorson.
My question on this has to do more with the council's involvement in it, because maybe I'm just misunderstanding. If we are auditing the way the town is running its business and, you know, personnel and all that, is that not something that the council has to keep out of? Because that's your job, correct? We are not able to direct anyone how to do anything by the charter.
We wouldn't be. It would
So
be
what is it?
reviewing the policy that we enforce and make sure that that's being followed.
Okay.
Policy, charter, whatever, however you want to call it, ordinance.
So would we, if this committee is made up of counselors, are we the enforcers? Is that our role? Or is that someone else's role?
A lot of that comes under management, to be honest, as far as making sure that the staff is complying with, you know, our purchasing procedures and all that. But I think an audit committee could look at procedures, like purchasing procedures and other areas like that and say, yeah, this
Yeah.
needs to be sharpened up on that side of it. As far as looking at line item expenditures, no, that's a management side of it. But I think what Councilor DeBartolomeo is looking at is more of the making sure the policies and those procedures are being adhered to and looking at it from a higher level
Okay.
Versus the granular level of saying, okay, well, you know, the assessor spent $500 on pull tabs or what have you. So that's kind of one of
Okay,
those
yeah, I
things.
get it with the sorry, it's late. The analogy of like ordinance for finance. Okay, that makes sense. Got it.
But I'll definitely, I could reach out to Jared, the new manager in Augusta, and get what they have and how they approach it, and get the magical listserv that I can reach out to from the manager's side of it and say who's doing that, and if you've got something similar situated, I'd love to see more about it and report back.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Counselor DeBartolomeo. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Yes!
Beautiful.
I think I was saying it too quickly.
Yes.
I'm going to slow down. Okay. Only for me, so a couple of counselors have asked about maybe talking about our own goals. So we'll do a council caucus part 2, if that works for everyone, and then we can talk about all of our own goals for the council, so not your personal goals like with your family, but your personal goals at the council level. Although I would love to hear about your personal goals as well. Okay, we are going to do, for those that are available, the Rhines Forest walkthrough with the town forester, Paul Larrabee, and Todd Ontel on October 5th. It is so much fun and so informative. You get fresh air, and we can make sure that there's coffee, so I would encourage everyone to go. And then finally, we have a request from Leanne Candora, the chair of the school board, to have a counselor to join the bi-weekly building committee. It's going to take place starting on September 11th, Wednesdays, bi-weekly, just to kind of have a rep there on the building committee. I know folks have different, there's other committee meetings happening on Wednesdays as well, so, and we don't need an answer right this second, but if you would like to discuss or throw your hat in the ring to join the building committee for the new school project, that is an option that's available because we have a seat for that.
What time are they going to have those? Did they say?
I think it's at 5:30, but I'm not sure. Let me check.
I would be intrigued.
Okay. If it works for everyone, I can find out the exact time and then fire out an email. Does that work? Or unless, Matt, you have any, do you have like a telepathic connection with the superintendent? Do you happen to know?
I do not at this point. I have
Okay,
not
but maybe
established
next
those
week you will.
communications, Madam Chair, but I did speak to him by the telephone this afternoon.
Okay, I will confirm that, and I'll fire an email out to everybody. Okay, cool beans. All right, that's it for me. And then next up, our final is executive session pursuant to Title I MRSA 4056C, renegotiation of real property, and pursuant to Title 36 MRSA Section 841 to consider and act on an application of abatement for property tax. I would take a motion to move into executive session.
So move.
All right, and a second.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Okay, we are now in executive session. Woo. Who?